Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 848 for the 5th of January 2025. Richard Saunders coming to you from a very warm, sunny Sydney, Australia. Coming up on this week's show, for crying out loud, it's Kat McLeod. And what an interesting, sort of out of left field a little bit, report coming to you from Kat today. It's all about medieval torture devices. What a start to the new year! An interesting report as ever from Kat McLeod, the myths concerning medieval torture devices. Following that, we look at the message the late former President Jimmy Carter sent off to space on the Voyager spacecraft. And this was a message he wrote in 1977 when the Voyager spacecraft were launched. A message from Earth streaming through the cosmos. Then to round off this week's episode, the TROVE Archive looks at the Bermuda Triangle. As reported over the years in Australian newspapers, and with special guest reader this week, the Secretary of Australian Skeptics, Lara Benham, which is quite appropriate, really, because Lara will be one of the people going to the Bermuda Triangle later this year on the Skeptoid adventure. And that's turning out to be quite the adventure with such people as Ross Blotcher, the famed skeptical podcaster, Ben Radford, the famed skeptical podcaster, Brian Dunning, the famed skeptical podcaster, and many other people. So Lara will be in very interesting company indeed. Anyway, more about the Bermuda Triangle later on in the show in Trove 2025. And I feel like I'm a bit of a broken record. I think I've done this before. But I can say, well, 2024 is over. And what happened? Well, UFOs did not appear to be real, as in alien spacecraft, alien spaceships, we might say. It was not established that aliens are visiting the planet Earth, whizzing around in spaceships, despite the promises of all those people who say any day now for years and years and years and years. Psychics have not been proven to be real in any way, shape or form, despite all those people who say for years and years and years and years it's all true and people do have psychic ability. Water diviners, water dowsers, water witches have not proven their case after years and years and years and years. The list goes on. The only group in society that seems to be on the money are the skeptical inquirers. The people who say, well, there's not yet enough evidence to establish X, Y, Z is actually a fact and really happens. And year after year after year, this continues to be the case. I think what will happen, here's my bold prediction for the rest of 2025. It will not be established that aliens are visiting Earth. No psychic will pass any test of their ability for the various cash prizes around the world from skeptical groups. No water diviner will prove that they can find water using their divining rods. No cryptids, no chupacabra, no Bigfoot, no monsters, Loch Ness, or any other description will be discovered. I think you can follow my reasoning. Anyway, that's my bold prediction for 2025. Well, that's all for me at the moment. It's time for me to run downstairs and have my first beverage after recording for 2025. What will it be? Let's start 2025 off with a bang. I'm going to have a hot cup of coffee and a marshmallow. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
out loud. It's Kat McLeod.
Hi, this is Kat McLeod, coming to you from latitude 53.5-ish in the Northern Hemisphere. Sadly, we've all heard about museums that have been involved with controversies, from scientific hoaxes to the illegal trafficking of specimens to unethical acquisitions. Sometimes museum exhibits tell more of a story instead of being a true representation of facts. This is a topic that may seem a little dark, but it does have a brighter side if you stick with me. If you've ever explored a medieval exhibit that includes torture devices, or been to a torture museum, yes, those exist, you've probably been lied to. Many alleged medieval torture devices were actually total fabrications by hoaxers, showmen, and con artists in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. These hoaxers would display these phony instruments of torture for commercial gain, telling people they were real medieval torture devices and charging people to see them. And unless a museum discloses that they are fictitious, the practice continues to this day. Not all devices are fake, however. Some are misattributed to the medieval time period, which was from approximately the 5th century through the 15th century. Let's start off by looking at the infamous rack. This is a real, but rarely used, torture device. Usually, it was used as a form of intimidation to instill fear and assert authority. It was a simple contraption. The victim was tied to a wooden structure, either a wooden board or ladder, and a system of cranks were turned, tightening the ropes that restrained the victim's limbs, stretching them beyond their endurance. It is reported to date back to around 350 BC in Greece. It was introduced at the Tower of London in 1420 by the Duke of Exeter and was touted for its capability to inflict excruciating pain with the aim of extorting confessions, often false, from prisoners. There's an account regarding the case of religious reformer Anne Askew, who was condemned for heresy in 1546, that her experience on the rack left her immobile and she needed to be carried to be burned at the stake. So make no mistake, history was brutal. At the Tower, however, the lieutenant had to have a warrant to support racking. Prisoners were shown the rack and threatened with it, which was often enough to intimidate them, so the rack didn't have to be used. The chastity belt was supposedly used as an anti-temptation device during the medieval period. When the knight left to fight the Crusades, his lady would wear a heavy iron chastity belt to preserve her faithfulness to him. However, there's no credible evidence that chastity belts even existed before the 15th century, which is over a century after the last Middle Eastern crusade. Research into the history of the chastity belt suggests that they were not used until the Renaissance period in the late 16th century, and then only rarely. They first became widely available in the form of 19th century anti-masturbation medical devices or as a form of protection women would wear to prevent sexual assault. The belts were not meant for long-term use, even with a padded layer to keep the metal from hurting the skin. They had to be removed or changed frequently to avoid sores or infection that could lead to sepsis or death. In 1996, the British Museum rejected the idea of the medieval chastity belt, removing one from their collection when it was found to have been created in the 19th century. However, the legend makes for great lore that has fascinated people for centuries, and its inaccurate past doesn't stop some people from using chastity belts today, as they've become a fetish item. Another famous device even inspired a band name. The Iron Maiden was an imposing iron sarcophagus-like cabinet, barely large enough to fit a person into, with spikes on the inside that would impale anyone as the door was closed. The spikes were not long enough to kill a person outright. Rather, they were short and placed in such a way that the victim would die a slow and agonizing death, bleeding out over time. There's no evidence that Iron Maidens existed, let alone were used in medieval times. The first mention of the Iron Maiden actually came from 18th century writer Johann Siebenkees, who described the device in a guidebook to the city of Nuremberg. Not long after Siebenkees published his account, Iron Maidens began to appear in museums across Europe and the United States, usually pieced together using various medieval artifacts and scraps to be put on display for those willing to pay a fee. One even appeared in the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago, despite it being completely fictitious. Have you heard of the pear of anguish, or choke pear? This was a pear-shaped device with metal leaves that could open and be expanded by turning a screw. Supposedly, medieval torturers would shove the device down the victim's throat, or into another orifice, and slowly turn the screw to make the leaves expand, leaving the victim in unbearable pain, kind of like a speculum on steroids. While there is some evidence that this device existed, it was unlikely that it was used for torture. Its actual purpose is unknown, but some scholars speculate it was used to extract juice from fruit, or it may have had another mundane purpose like being a shoe stretcher. The scold's bridle was also called the witch's or gossip's bridle. This was a device made primarily for women to keep the wearer from speaking. It first appeared in the Renaissance, not the medieval period, noted in Scotland in 1567. Again, this device existed more as a threat of public humiliation to control people rather than actually being used, although there are a few written accounts of women being subjected to wearing one for short periods of time. It was an instrument of punishment in the form of an iron muzzle that enclosed the head with a bridle bit that was inserted in the mouth, either to compress the wearer's tongue or press it up against the palate to prevent the wearer from speaking. Nowadays, teenagers are willingly mewing, which is pressing your tongue on your soft palate. Anyway, I digress. In addition to preventing the wearer from speaking, the bridle could also be painful or unpleasant to wear because it induced excess salivation and caused fatigue. The bridle was a form of public humiliation because it was very visible, and wearing such a bridle was regarded as shameful because you were likely the town gossip. The lengths that men go to in order to silence women is rather shocking. The brazen bull was likely a brazen lie. Dating back to ancient Greece, around the 6th century BCE, supposedly it was a massive hollow bronze bull with a door in the side. A person could supposedly be put inside the bull, and a fire would be kindled underneath. The metal would then be heated until the person inside was roasted to death. Supposedly, the person's screams would be funneled through an acoustic apparatus to make it sound like the bull was bellowing. Some say Romans used this to execute early Christians, but like many stories from antiquity, the truth about the brazen bull is hard to verify. There has never been any archaeological evidence that the brazen bull existed in ancient Greece, nor was it depicted in ancient art. The Spanish tickler, or cat's paw, was purported to be a claw-shaped metal rake-like instrument that functioned as an extension of the torturer's hand and was used to tear away the victim's naked flesh. The tickler was 4-pronged, whereas the cat's paw had 3 prongs. This device was created on the 15th of December 2005 by a Wikipedia editor with the username AndyOK, who created a hoax page on Wikipedia titled Spanish Tickler. In the early days of Wikipedia, it was easier for false information pages to be created without being discovered. The hoax Wikipedia page was discovered by responsible Wikipedia editors on the 2nd of March 2018 and has since been deleted. There are a number of websites, however, that still list this as an actual torture device. They've not been updated in many years. In a relatively short time since the Spanish tickler was invented, it has metastasized across the internet into popular culture, which serves as a good reminder that just because something's on the internet does not mean it's factual. Most of the myths about torture in medieval times were spread by people living in the 18th and 19th centuries, who likely exaggerated when it came to their accounts of the Middle Ages. As time passed, that exaggeration compounded, so now many of these 18th century myths are viewed as fact. It's important to remember who was recounting the stories and what their motives might have been. People in the Georgian and Victorian times were preoccupied with class systems and their desire to appear more enlightened, cultured, and intelligent than previous generations. So, sorry. While the medieval times have been portrayed as the dark age of torture, and we've been taught to consider the Middle Ages as backward, brutish, and ignorant, it was 1,000 years filled with mass migration, pandemic disease, famine, changes in political and societal structures, as well as technological change that led to the Age of Discovery. Remember to ask questions, check references, and stay curious. From Kitty Corner Studios in Edmonton, Canada, this is Kat McLeod. And if you would like to become a Wikipedia editor to ensure that false information does not go unchecked, remember, anyone can join, and Susan Gerbic has the Guerrilla Skeptics of Wikipedia. Reach out to her on Facebook if you'd like to take her training and become an official Guerrilla Skeptic on Wikipedia, like me.
Hi, I'm Ben Radford, co-host of Squaring the Strange podcast. In these trying times, as we help each other out to hold on to hope, we want you to know that we're here for you.
Hey, what are you going on about?
Who's interrupting my heartfelt promotional copy?
It's me, Celestia Ward, your co-host. Really? In these trying times? That's the best you can do?
Well, I'm just doing what everyone else is doing. I thought...
That's not what we do.
Oh, for crying out loud, who else is here?
Pascual Romero, your other co-host?
Hey.
We don't do what everybody else does, Ben. That's kind of our thing at Squaring the Strange.
Yeah, we try to approach things a little differently than your standard skeptical talky talk show.
We do our own thing, bringing science, critical thinking, and skepticism to bear on issues of the day. We've got a professional skeptical author, Ben, who has decades of experience researching topics for 12 books and thousands of articles.
And a cartoonist skeptic, Celestia, who knows her stuff when it comes to facial weirdness and the psychology of perception.
And a badass heavy metal rock star and tech engineer, Pascual, who brings knowledge of all things audio, plus a bunch of neck tattoos.
Squaring the Strange explores topics both mysterious and mundane through a critical lens. Monsters, panics, media literacy.
Okay, forget the whole trying times promo idea. But we have chupacabras and clown panics, right?
Yes, Ben.
Now, last week on the Skeptic Zone, you might remember we were chatting about the drones. Droning on about drones. Droning on about drones. And the prediction by Ross Coulthart that, what was it now? Along the lines of early in 2025, all hell is going to break loose with the drones. It's a bigger story than you can ever imagine, or something like that. Well, what's early? Well, January's early. You could say February is early 2025, January, February, March, March is early 25. And then you think, well, then it sort of slips into mid-2025. Let's see, January, February, March, April. Yeah, let's see what happens by April. But speaking of drones, my friend and our guest reporter from time to time, Rob Palmer, reminded me that he wrote an article for Skeptical Inquirer, which is online, which I'll link to in this week's show notes, called The Christmas Drone Invasion. What is going on? This was published on the 23rd of December. So that's a worthwhile look at the drone situation, the drones invading, coming from the ocean, as some people seem to think. The Christmas drone invasion. Now, speaking of space things going on in the cosmos, and with the sad death of former President Jimmy Carter in the last week, this statement, I guess you'd say, yes, statement from the White House, published, or written, I should say, written on June 16, 1977, has been doing the rounds online, and I verified this is true. This is a true statement, and this was something that President Carter wrote to accompany the Voyager spacecraft, which is still out there, streaming into the cosmos. Statement. This Voyager spacecraft was constructed by the United States of America. We are a community of 240 million human beings among the more than 4 billion who inhabit the planet Earth. We human beings are still divided into nation states, but these states are rapidly becoming a single global civilization. We cast this message into the cosmos. It is likely to survive 1 billion years into our future, when our civilization is profoundly altered and the surface of the Earth may be vastly changed. Of the 200 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy, some, perhaps many, may have inhabited planets and spacefaring civilizations. If one such civilization intercepts Voyager and can understand these recorded contents, here is our message. This is a present from a small, distant world, a token of our sounds, our science, our images, our music, our thoughts, and our feelings. We are attempting to survive our time so we may live into yours. We hope someday, having solved the problems we face, to join a community of galactic civilizations. This record represents our hope and our determination and our goodwill in a vast and awesome universe. Jimmy Carter, President of the United States of America. And finally, dealing with space, I guess you could say dealing with space news, it was very pleasing to see that actor Tom Baker, who was best known for playing the Fourth Doctor in the Doctor Who series, was awarded an MBE, a high honour in the British honours system. Congratulations, Tom.
Hey everyone, it's Brian Dunning from Skeptoid here. I want to extend a special invitation to all of you. In mid-2025, Skeptoid will be celebrating our 1000th podcast episode. So we're throwing a big party by taking 60 of you to the Bermuda Triangle. It's July 7th through the 11th, departing and returning at Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We're having our own Skeptic Conference in our private conference facility aboard ship, plus more Skeptoidy events ashore at stops on Bimini and Key West. Come and celebrate 1,000 episodes of Skeptoid with me and a boatload of special guests in the Bermuda Triangle. You can learn all about it and punch your ticket now at skeptoid.com/events. That's skeptoid.com/events. Reserve your spot now and hope you make it back.
Now it's time once again to go back to those archives at Trove at trove.nla.gov.au. Have a look. Run there after the show. Type in a search. You never know what you might find in Australian printed history. especially those people who are looking up ancestors in Australia. I've discovered many references to my father, my grandfather on both sides, and other people going back some generations, which has always been very interesting. And indeed, my grandmother. I found a report about an illness she had, believe it or not. But anyway, getting back to Trove in general and looking up things. This week, we're going to be looking for references to the Bermuda Triangle. Now, when I was a kid growing up in the 1970s during the time of Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, UFOs, psychics and so on, that was the golden era. I guess it was, yeah. Bermuda Triangle was certainly in there. It was considered to be a huge mystery and all sorts of legends abounded. But let's quickly look at Wikipedia, and there are various listings for Bermuda Triangle, including a ride at a fun fair or something like that. Bermuda Triangle, urban legend based on region in North Atlantic. Devil's Triangle redirects here. Oh yes, sometimes it's called the Devil's Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle, is a loosely defined region between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico in the North Atlantic Ocean. Since the mid-20th century, the area has been subject to an urban legend which claims that many aircraft and ships have disappeared there under mysterious circumstances. However, reputable sources dismiss the idea that there is any mystery. And I guess that's why you really don't hear much about the Bermuda Triangle anymore. The earliest suggestion of unusual disappearances in the Bermuda area appeared in an article written by Edward Van Winkle Jones in the Miami Herald that was distributed to the Associated Press and appeared in various American newspapers on the 17th of September, 1950. And the article goes on about various other reports and incidents in the area. Flight 19 was covered again in the April 1962 issue of the American Legion magazine. In it, author Alan W. Eckert wrote that the flight leader had been heard saying, quote, "We cannot be sure of any direction, everything is wrong, strange, the ocean doesn't look as it should," end quote. And that's a whole other story, of course. I mean, there are many stories concerning the Bermuda Triangle of disappearances and the real explanation behind them. We have a section here, Criticism of the Concept. Larry Kirsch, author of the Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved, 1975, argued that many claims of Gaddis, probably another author, and subsequent writers were exaggerated, dubious, or unverifiable. Kirsch concluded the number of ships and aircraft reported missing in the area was not significantly greater, proportionally speaking, than any other part of the ocean. In an area frequented by tropical cyclones, the number of disappearances that did occur were, for the most part, neither disproportionate, unlikely, nor mysterious. And we could go on reading more about that on the wiki page. Oh, there is another section here, Paranormal Explanations. Triangle writers have used a number of supernatural concepts to explain the events. One explanation pins the blame on leftover technology from the mythical lost continent of Atlantis. Sometimes connected to the Atlantis story is the submerged rock formation known as the Bimini Road off the island of Bimini in the Bahamas. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is in the triangle by some definitions. Followers of the purported psychic Edgar Cayce take his prediction that evidence of Atlantis would be found in 1968 as referring to the discovery of the Bimini Road. Believers describe the formation as a road, wall, or other structure, but the Bimini Road is of natural origin. Some hypothesize that a parallel universe exists in the Bermuda Triangle region, causing a time-space warp that sucks the objects around it into a parallel universe. Others attribute the events to UFOs. Charles Berlitz, author of various books, lists several theories attributing the losses in the triangle to anomalous or unexplained forces. Now, it's interesting, of course, that Charles Berlitz, the man behind many language books, How to Speak Other Languages, is mentioned because here I have a copy of Flim Flam, and I've referred to this book before, of course. Flim Flam, Psychics, ESP, Unicorns and Other Delusions by James Randi, the amazing Randi. And I'm always pleased to open this book to Richard Saunders, of my valued Aussie pal, James Randi, 2010, signed on my birthday. It's very nice. Anyway, on page 42, we have a chapter called All at Sea. The time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot. Lewis Carroll, The Walrus and the Carpenter. So let me take the liberty of reading a little bit of this from Flim Flam. It is careless of a man to fail to sufficiently research a subject on which he claims to be an authority. It is irresponsible for him to resist telling the facts when he discovers them. And it is irresponsible and callous for him to continue to misrepresent matters about which he has been informed to the contrary. J'accuse Charles Berlitz of these failings. Berlitz is the author of The Bermuda Triangle, Mysteries from Forgotten Worlds, and Without a Trace, all of which contain such demonstrable errors and misstatements that the simplest investigation of these claims, made easily, shows that these books should have been classified as fiction rather than fact. I am told that Berlitz speaks some 30 languages, 11 of them fluently. Perhaps he is able to state his spurious claims in all 30 tongues, since he is heir to the creation of his grandfather, who founded the famous Berlitz language schools. But I won't go on. That's a very interesting chapter in the wonderful book Flim Flam. And I certainly hope you seek that book out and read it from cover to cover. Nevertheless, let's have a look at some of the published reports over the years from the Australian press. And this week, joining me in the Trove studio, the little Trove nook, is Secretary of Australian Skeptics, Lara Benham.
And now we turn to the pages of the Canberra Times, dated Sunday, the 5th of November, 1978. Scientific Programme, Bermuda Triangle Experiment. Moscow, Saturday. Australian Associated Press, Reuters. A worldwide experiment next month might solve the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle area of the Atlantic, where 100 ships and 20 planes have disappeared since 1945, according to a Soviet scientist. Oceanologist Mr. Luke Mikhailovich Fomin said that at the end of December, 10,000 weather stations throughout the world, 50 research ships, meteorological satellites, and research aircraft would take synchronized readings in the area. Mr. Fomin, who heads a Soviet team which has studied the phenomenon for nearly 2 years, said in an interview with the Soviet Labour newspaper, TRUD, that there was nothing puzzling about the area, which lies between Bermuda, Florida, and Puerto Rico. Information from next month's experiment would help scientists to understand the air currents in the areas, their interaction with the ocean, and finally to unravel the myth of the Bermuda Triangle.
Now let's turn to the pages of Army. And this is listed here as Army the Soldier's newspaper, published in Canberra. Anyway, this report comes to us from the 14th of December 1995. Bell tolls for Triangle's 14 vanished airmen. Fort Lauderdale, Florida, December 6th, Associated Press. A bell tolled once for each of the 14 crew members aboard Navy planes that disappeared 50 years ago near the Bermuda Triangle during a routine mission, by Tony Winton of the Associated Press. The missing bombers and the lead pilot's radio transmission that his compass had stopped working have fueled the Bermuda Triangle legend. Among the theories is that the entire squadron was snatched by space aliens. To compound the tragedy, a seaplane dispatched that night to search for the 5 missing planes crashed and exploded in rough seas, killing 13 people. Hundreds, including relatives of the crew and aviators, gathered yesterday to remember the men of Flight 19. Many at the ceremony, near where the bombers took off, didn't buy into the Bermuda Triangle mystique. Quote, "I hope that this program will put to rest once and for all the needless innuendos, speculation, and sensational journalism relative to this event," end quote, said Navy Lieutenant Commander Maurice Schmidt, who gave the benediction. Quote, "They are not lost. I repeat, they are not lost. The Lord knows, and it is my hope that they are with him in paradise," end quote. A colourful guard stood at attention as a wreath of red, white and blue flowers was placed at a simple concrete memorial, topped by a single propeller facing the ocean. A bell was struck 14 times, and the names of the airmen were read aloud. Retired Navy radioman John Barner dismissed the wild rumours. He says he was in a plane that took off right after Flight 19 and flew with them briefly before veering off on a separate mission. Quote, "One day at work, some guy came up to me and said how the UFOs came and gobbled up his squadron of airplanes," end quote, said Barner, 69, from Haddon Township, New Jersey. Quote, "And I said, 'You're talking to the right guy, buddy, 'cause I flew with them and I didn't see the UFOs," end quote. The 5 TBM Avengers left on a practice torpedo bombing run on December 5, 1945 to fly 90 kilometres to a bombing range near the Bahamas, then continue on a navigational exercise, flying a triangular course back to Fort Lauderdale. The flight leader was soon lost in hazy skies, despite clear and sunny weather. He radioed that his compasses weren't working. Radio contact was maintained until the planes ran out of fuel, still searching for the way home. Flight 19's disappearance became part of the legend of the Bermuda Triangle, a section of ocean between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, where aircraft and ships have vanished mysteriously. Navy and Coast Guard officials have scoffed at the Bermuda Triangle theory, noting that some of the world's busiest shipping and flight lanes crisscross the area and that over the years, accidents are bound to happen. Flight 19 even figured in director Steven Spielberg's film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, in which first the planes and then the men were returned by aliens.
And this one is from the Port Lincoln Times, dated Thursday the 9th of June 1977. Flying saucers will go on display. An authority on flying saucers, Mr. Colin Norris, is to mount a display on the subject at the Port Lincoln branch of Woolworths next week. Regularly quoted in the press and radio, Mr. Norris is Public Relations Officer of the Australian Flying Saucer Research Society, which has amassed a great deal of information about saucer sightings. The society was founded in 1952 and is the oldest established private body studying the unidentified flying objects. Mr. Norris's display will include reports, photographs and clippings of UFO sightings made throughout the world during the past 25 years. The display also has details about unexplained incidents which may be associated with flying saucer activity, such as ship disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle and the mystery disappearances of people. A chart showing flight patterns across the state will be included in the display. This display will open at lunchtime on Friday, June the 17th in Woolworths Foyer and continue throughout the afternoon. In the evening, Mr. Norris will be guest speaker at a meeting of the Port Lincoln Apex Club, and on June the 16th he will speak at a meeting of the Streaky Bay Apex Club.
Now let's turn to the pages of the Canberra Times, dated the 11th of October, 1977. Bermuda Triangle mystery remains. Moscow, Monday, Australian Associated Press. A Soviet research team has returned from the Bermuda Triangle, a patch of the Atlantic Ocean noted for ship and aircraft disasters, saying that nothing supernatural is present, Associated Press reports. The team operated the research ship Viktor Bugov, I hope that's pronounced, as part of the Soviet Union's contribution to Polymode, a 5-nation scientific expedition to the area that began earlier this year. The group did not suggest what could be causing the disasters. Well, thank you very much to the Secretary of Australian Skeptics, Lara Benham. You hear Lara occasionally on the Skeptic Zone, of course. At the end of the show, doing the dice game. Maybe we should do one this week. But there you go. References in Australian newspapers and so on to the famed Bermuda Triangle, something you really don't hear about much anymore. But you too can find out about things you don't hear much about anymore when you go to Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, because when you go there, the things you don't hear about much anymore. No, I've got that wrong. When you go there, you never know what things you don't hear about much anymore you'll find. Figure it out for yourselves. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast, and thank you to those people for another year. Support the Skeptic Zone with PayPal or Patreon at skepticzone.tv. And indeed, if you go to the YouTube channel of the Skeptic Zone, or if you listen to the show on YouTube, you'll find a QR code for PayPal where you can click that and send a contribution right off the screen there. Why not start 2025 off with a special thanks to the Skeptic Zone? If you send $25 as a one-off contribution, that $25 does go a long way. If you've never supported the show before by one-off contributions, or if you've never been a weekly or monthly subscriber for a very little amount, why not consider it for the start of 2025? It's a way to show your support for what we do here at the Skeptic Zone. I hope to see some of you next week at Skeptics in the Pub here in Sydney. And that will be on the 9th of January, Thursday the 9th of January, at the Occidental Hotel, right near Wynyard train station, downtown Sydney. And Skeptics in the Pub in Sydney now has been going for, well, over 20 years. Maybe 22 or 23 years or something like that. And coming up later this year in Skeptics in the Pub, at least once, maybe twice, we'll have another special trivia night. The last one we had was just before Skepticon, a couple of months back, and that was a big hit, a lot of fun. And before I go, I'm looking forward to working with all my reporters again for another year, and those wonderful people behind the scenes who help me with other matters concerning the show. As some of you may know, my spelling is not the best, and that wonderful skeptical fairy flies down from the internet, checks my work. So the web page of the Skeptic Zone, the weekly update should be in shipshape. But for this week, for the first week of 2025, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Yes, it's the dice game.
Yes, let's do the dice game.
Welcome to the Skeptic Zone studio. Lara, this is your first time in the official studio.
It is. I've done some recording before, but I've never been in the studio with the Skeptic Zone cats.
Yeah, there was one here before. Thank you for contributing to the show this week, and we're going to play the dice game.
We are. We're going to do 4 rolls.
Yep.
Do you want to tell me what your predictions are, Richard?
Yeah, it's a D10.
Ooh, sorry, yeah.
So my predictions are 3, 5, 1, and 8.
Okay. I'm going to go 5 to start, and then a 2, another 2, and a 6.
Ooh. Do the honours, please.
You can do the rolls.
I can do the rolls?
I'll do the writing, you do the rolls.
All right, here we go. Roll number 1. 3.
Unbelievable. Well, that's clearly cheating.
That's 1. Oh, there's Henrietta. She's just... Oh, no, it's Maud. Look.
Oh, hi, Maud. Hello. Do you want to come and do the dice game? Yeah?
They were both in here. Okay, that was roll number 1. Roll number 2. Here it comes.
It's a 4. None of us.
Roll number 3. 3.
3. None of us again.
And roll number 4. Here it comes. You want a 6. I want an 8. 9.
9. Which could be a 6, really.
Well, sort of. Today's winning numbers are...
3, 4, 3, and 9.
Thank you, Skeptic Zone Kat.
Hi, Maud. You haven't come to say hi. Look, hi. She's like, no, she's normally downstairs. This is not acceptable. Not acceptable. On June the 16th, he will speak at a meeting of the Streaky Bay Apex Club. I don't know what that was, but it made me laugh when I read it yesterday. What is that bit?
It's a place. It's
Streaky Bay.
Well-known nudist place. I think.
I thought you were being serious for a second.
So I want you to say now.
Oh, just FYI.
Yeah.
When I was watching Kenny Biddle the other day, it got to the end, and because I watch it on my computer, I just kind of let it run. And sometimes it doesn't actually, it's meant to play his outro and then it's meant to disconnect automatically, and sometimes it doesn't. So it didn't. So all of a sudden he's like, oh, and we're back on again. And I just went, dice game. And he goes, yay, let's do the dice game. And you need to, actually, we should watch it in a minute because it was quite funny.
All right.
We'll watch it with that. I'll show you my comments because I kept, it was funny. I got none of them right.
So are you saying that other people are using the dice game on their...
Oh, you want to put this in?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did the dice game the other day on Kenny Biddle's live stream on his New Year.
Big shout out to Kenny Biddle.